good morning, or depending when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name is Ross, and as always told, Out of Voice Radio. So today, we've got a new supporter card to talk about. I know, right? I like supporter cards. Supporter cards are good. What about Sabrina? Well, Sabrina, now bearing in mind that this is from Tag Bolt, this is a Kanto-themed set. That is to say that we've got a bunch of Kanto-themed cards. We know we're getting a reprint of Brock's Grit. We know we're getting Erica's Hospitality. And we're getting Sabrina's Suggestion. But what does it actually do? Well, our translation has come from the lovely David Hochmann over at limitlesstcg.com/translations. And it lets you look at your opponent's hand, choose a supporter card you find there, and use it. It's Smeagol! It is literally Smeagol! This is the Smeagol which came around in the Heart Gold Soul Silver block, had the lovely portrait ability, which let you look at your opponent's hand, find a supporter card, and use it. Literally that. Here's the thing though, just before we get too far down this rabbit hole, it's not Smeagol. Now don't get me wrong, it is the exact effect of Smeagol's ability, but Smeagol had Sky Arrow Bridge, which gave free retreat to it or other Pokemon with one retreat, as long as they of course were basics. Sky Arrow Bridge was for basics, and people were playing Switch, and we would regularly be able to pull off 2 or 3 of these portraits in a single turn. So for that reason, it's not quite Smeagol. It is your only supporter card for the turn, and it is risky as you like. Because sometimes this is going to be absolutely, utterly amazing. We have all had games where we need one more Guzma, and we just don't have it. Well, maybe your opponent does, so you can play Sabrina and go ahead and copy Guzma. What's even better and more satisfying, we've all had those games where the next one to draw a Guzma wins, and you don't have a Guzma, and then the second you pass, your opponent does have a Guzma. How much more satisfying would it be if not only could you drop the first Guzma to win the game, but you were actually doing so with your opponent's Guzma? Tell me that wouldn't be a satisfying and not to put too fine a point on it, hilarious way to win the game. I believe it would. But then there's plenty of one-off supporters that people aren't playing, but their opponents might be. I'm thinking about things like Team Skull Grunt. Team Skull Grunt lets you look at the hand of your opponent and then discard a couple of energy cards from their hand. It's a fun little niche card that a bunch of people are playing, but there are plenty of people out there that cannot find room in their deck. Maybe you use Sabrina and you find it. Here's the thing though. There is no guarantee of finding what you want here. Because what happens if you desperately need a draw supporter? You just need something like a Cynthia to draw some cards and get you back into the game, and you look at your opponent's hand and they have nothing, because they might. Using Sabrina to look at your opponent's hand and finding they have no supporter is exactly as useful as using a Team Skull Grunt and looking at your opponent's hand only to find out they don't have any energy in hand. I should mention, I don't think I've actually said, it's called Sabrina's Suggestion. There we go. So it is a bit of a risk, except it's not actually that much of a risk, because a couple of days ago we had a look at the card Lavender Town. And this is so good with Lavender Town. You see, Lavender Town is a stadium card that lets you look at your opponent's hand. For something like this, it's amazing. Now, when I looked at Lavender Town, I said, look, for things like Mimikyu and Gengar Tag Team GX that have Poltergeist, you do 50 damage for each trainer card in your opponent's hand, this is phenomenal. Because you can look to see how many trainer cards they've got before you make the decision to use the Poltergeist attack. And I said for Team Skull Grunt, it's amazing, because you get to look at your opponent's hand and see if they've got energy, and if so, what energy, so that you can make an educated decision. And I told you in that video that there are going to be plenty of other things released before Lavender Town rotates that can take advantage of Lavender Town. Well, wouldn't you know it, ladies and gentlemen, this is one of those things. And it's a really, really good one. Because now you get to look at your opponent's hand and make the choice. If you need a Cynthia, you can check to see if your opponent has a Cynthia. If you need a Guzma, you can check to see if your opponent has got the Guzma. And sometimes you can just have a look at your opponent's hand just to see if they've got anything that seems like fun. And there are going to be games you find a supporter card you are not expecting that is actually incredibly useful. Now, the other thing is, this makes Sabrina Suggestion a card on which you cannot rely. Unless you really feel lucky, or you're in a deck that just does not rely on playing particular supporters, you're probably not going to be playing 4 of these. Now, maybe you're playing a really aggressively Pokemon-themed draw, something like Oranguru and Macargo and Zeb Striker and all of that, and you really aren't using supporters at all, maybe in that context. But generally speaking, there are still going to be supporters you'd rather have on a particular turn. So Sabrina really seems like a one-off. But then again, I've just mentioned Macargo and Oranguru. Macargo lets you put any card on top of your deck. Oranguru lets you draw until you got 3 cards in hand. So the pair of them together, as long as you can get down to fewer than 3 cards in hand, guarantees you get whatever card you like. And let's not forget we've got Tapu Lele, or an expanded Jirachi. But I'm going to be honest with you, there is one reason to play Jirachi, and that's level ball. Because Tapu Lele has a better weakness, because it doesn't have one, more HP, a better attack, and the same retreat cost. So the only reason you would play Jirachi is if you're playing level ball. But let's give him a bit of love anyway. You can search out supporters. And Sabrina is a niche card. Niche if you're American. It is a very niche card. But it can be fun. Essentially, you've got to be able to search out supporters, although basically every deck can. And you've got to be playing Lavender Town, or I suppose Gumshoe's GX, whose ability does let you look at your opponent's hand once per turn, although at the moment, put it this way, I don't want to say nobody's playing Gumshoes, because I'm sure somebody somewhere is. Somebody watching this probably is. If you are, pop a comment down in the comment section, please. I'd love to hear from you. But the reality is, it has been an exceedingly long time since I saw a deck list doing well with Gumshoes in. It has happened. Gumshoes saw a little bit of love when Houndoom Mill was being played by David Rudhoff in the International Championships in London in 2016, 2 years ago. But that as well. And if you're playing a card that lets you look at your opponent's hand, and you're able to search out supporter cards, then Sabrina's Suggestion actually becomes a really fun 1 or 2 card tech. Because if you see your opponent has got Team Skull Grunt, and they've got their once per game Beast Energy in hand, you can drop this and it's hilarious. If you've run out of Guzma, and you see your opponent's got a Guzma, you can use it. If you've got a Sightseer in hand, but you really don't want to discard your hand, but you're not going to draw any cards unless you do, you can use this if your opponent's got a Cynthia in hand. I do think this is a good card that will see play, but I think it can only realistically see a lot of play in decks that are playing Lavender Town. You've got to know what you're getting here. You've got to drop this with an expectation of, I am hitting this card. Now, don't get me wrong, it sounds like a lot of fun to play Sabrina just for the sake of it, and I would love a format in which every player has to play for Sabrina just for the chaos that would ensue. Also, if you ever want to play a fun game of Pokemon, play that as a rule, because that would be so much fun. Most of the time, you can't afford to use this. Yes, it worked beautifully with Smeargle, but Smeargle got you extra supporters in addition to your supporter for the turn, and it was still a risky endeavour. Sabrina is your supporter for the turn, and you could hit nothing. Or you could only hit a Sightseer when you've got stuff in your hand you really don't want to discard. Now, according to David's translation, it says choose a supporter you find there and use the effect of it. And Smeagol was you had to use it. So the other thing is here, you might end up hurting yourself. Now, at the moment, we don't have Professor Sycamore, because back when Smeagol was a thing, you could run into Juniper and it was terrifying, but you could still run into something like a Judge and run yourself out. So Sabrina is exceedingly risky. But as a one-card tech in stuff that's playing Lavender Town, so you know before you look what you're going to be able to use, I really like this. I think it's a one-card tech or a two-card tech, so I'm giving it between 3 and 4 Wassies. We don't give half Wassies, that would be barbaric. It is not a stunning played in every deck 4 of or anything silly like that, but it is a nice 5th Guzma, as well as being a 5th Cynthia, as well as being a Team Skull Grunt in a deck that doesn't play Team Skull Grunt. If you play it without Lavender Town, you are being risky. But I like this a lot. And now I would like to know if you like it. So do let me know in the comment section, please. Make sure you go nuts, but I would ask you very nicely to be nice. And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at @TheWassie, and Twitch for some live action at twitch.tv/PTCGRadio. If you want to support the channel, get some bonus podcasts and all of that, head on over to patreon.com/PTCGRadio, where you can do exactly that. And do make sure you're checking out youtube.com/WassiePlays for some more Wassie action. But by far the most important thing, as always, is to look after yourselves until next time. Thank you very much for watching. My name is Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.